When nonprofit workers burn out, they tend to leave the sector entirely. And it's about 70% of people who, when they burn out, they leave the sector. That's a huge brain drain. They're taking decades of experience and knowledge with them, and that's hurting our sector. And we personally know people who were in a similar position where they were ready to leave the sector. They were at a burnout point, they had their bags packed, and they were ready to go. And then they found Fractional, and now it's been years, and they're still continuing to work as fractionals, and they're still continuing to support organizations and bring their expertise and their knowledge to them.
Hi, I'm your host, Maria Rio. I moved to Canada as a refugee, used charitable services myself, and have been fundraising for over a decade. I love exploring ways our sector can grow, change, and make the world more equitable. The Small Nonprofit Podcast is where we do just that. I believe small nonprofits are where the most transformative work happens. But we've been set up to fail by systems that expect us to do more with less. Every week, I sit down with leaders, fundraisers, and changemakers who are doing things differently. They're building sustainable funding without compromising their values, creating power instead of dependence, and pushing back on the broken systems we've all inherited. You'll walk away with actionable strategies you can use, not just inspiration. So if you're ready to stop scrambling and start building something that lasts, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my predictions for the future of nonprofit work, fractional work. What is it? When does it come into play? If you're new here, my name is Maria Rio, and I'm an expert fundraiser with over a decade of fundraising experience. And more important than that, I'm on a mission to make sure EDs can raise more funds without the stress. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin McBride. I'm a certified fundraising executive, also with over a decade of experience, and I'm here to make fundraising feel less chaotic and more doable for small nonprofits.
So, Caitlin, you are a fractional expert. Me too. It's nice to be here. But a lot of people are unfamiliar with the concept of fractional work, fractional executives. What does it mean to you?
I think for me, it's really going in and filling in the gaps with the organization that we work with. We look at what they're doing, like what they're doing well, where the staff capacity is, where it isn't, where the opportunities are. And we work with them within those gaps to really improve infrastructure, build a foundation, and help them really achieve goals. We usually work with clients for at least 12 months. And, during that time, we're really able to see some real results and make a real impact within an organization. When I first started, it made me think that it was like, you get a tiny, tiny sliver of a person's time. But in reality, it's a very intense contract and it's very intensive work. And you are really embedded within a team. In the work that we do, we max out at 3 fractional clients. So that's the amount of clients that I have. I don't take on any more than that. So those clients are getting a really decent chunk of my time. Like I was online all morning with one of my clients trying to get a grant submission in with them and spending the time that they need to push them over the finish line and everything. But like really, yeah, embedded within the team and understanding who they are and working with all different members of the team and their donors and their board. So it is it's a very intensive contract and way of working with people. What do you think? What does fractional mean to you?
Fractional to me, I think, feels more than just a traditional consultant where you are given a report and the person walks away and you have this report now that you might not know what to do with, right? So fractional to me is giving the organization the actual opportunity to implement that plan. So not just have it on their shelves, but have the insight to do A/B testing, the insight to not have to look at 10 different websites to find the one resource that you're looking for. It's just really making best use of someone's expertise in a way that allows you to build and move forward and start to scale, or at least start to build the foundations for scaling. But I do like what you're saying. There are some myths around fractional, but I want to talk a little bit more about the world outside of fractional fundraising. Because fundraising definitely is one way in which people have approached fractional work in our sector. And, Cindy Wegman, of course, was the previous host of this podcast. She now runs a fractional academy. So she's teaching people how to become fractional executives for nonprofits specifically. But I was really interested by that because I didn't realize how many like HR fractional consultants they were, or like financial, like CFOs, fractional executives doing this kind of work. And then also like even comms, right? So it's a pretty deep world.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing. And I love that this was one of your predictions for the future of nonprofit work. And I really hope that it comes true because as somebody who's been in the nonprofit space for 15, 20 years, I've never worked in an organization that had HR. And that is crazy because it is something that feels like a luxury sometimes in nonprofit organizations, but in every single organization I worked in, we needed HR. So to be able to have access to these experts and access to these resources and this support at a cost that is going to work for smaller organizations is amazing. And I've met a lot of other organizations or companies who are doing like the finance piece too. And Maria, like you and I know when we walk into an organization sometimes and open those books and take a look at their finances, things can get pretty wild because they can't afford a full-time accounting person on staff. So having the kind of fractional system or fractional way of working with somebody available to organizations, I think is so amazing. And it's so great to give smaller organizations access to the help and support and expertise that they really need to thrive.
Especially since a lot of the reasons why people turn to fractional in the first place is because they can't find that special person. They can't find their fundraising unicorn. They can't find an HR person that wants to work for $20,000 a year, right? So there is something that meets the need and addresses that gap, which I think is really, really, really interesting. We don't want a huge brain drain from the sector, but there are a lot of people already leaving the sector because of different issues. And they're turning to becoming fractional executives. So I think there's something interesting there where we're actually keeping these people in the sector rather than losing, their 20 years, 30 years of experience. And they're able to provide that insight at a level that internally you just can't get because you can't afford it.
It's huge, and I think that that is so, so important. We, in a previous episode, talked about the Future of Good study, and I think it said something along the lines of when nonprofit workers burn out, they tend to leave the sector entirely, and it's about 70% of people who, when they burn out, they leave the sector, and that is, as you said, I love that term, that's a huge brain drain. They're taking decades of experience and knowledge with them, and that's hurting our sector. And we personally know people who were in a similar position where they were ready to leave the sector. They were at a burnout point, they had their bags packed, and they were ready to go. And then they found fractional. And now it's been years, and they're still continuing to work as fractionals and they're still continuing to support organizations and bring their expertise and their knowledge to them. So I think it's a fantastic model to be able to retain that talent and that knowledge and that expertise. I'm a fan personally.
One of the things that I find a lot of organizations who are maybe like confused about fractional or a little bit hesitant is like, why not just do it in house? And I want to share this example because I actually, in 2018, took it upon myself to learn how to develop a website so I could start building a website for the organization that I worked at, right? Because their website was so, so bad. And I knew it was like a huge deterrent to people becoming donors. So instead of just working with a vendor and solving this in 2 months, it took me about nine. Right. And I think that that's something that we're really resistant to. Like, instead of just shopping it out to someone who can get your campaign done in maybe 2 to 3 days if you have the stories and stuff like that. They can write a really stellar campaign. We want to do it in house and we want to kind of like trod through it, even if sometimes we can afford it. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have definitely seen that. Similarly to you, wanted to rebuild a website. I'll admit this on this podcast to our many friends out there, but I actually enlisted a volunteer to help me do my website. And that volunteer is my mother, who is actually a really good website designer. But yeah, similarly, like it wasn't a contract or anything. Like it took longer. And the other thing that I think about, and I think is so hilarious sometimes, I used to work for a sporting organization. I have no photography skills whatsoever. I'm terrible. I have no artistic skills, no photography skills. But because I was in house and I was in the communications team, they flew me out from BC to Nova Scotia to be the official photographer for the team, despite the fact that I was very bad at it. But then it was like, oh, they didn't have to pay somebody extra, but they paid for an entire flight for me to go across the country and take some bad photographs for a week. There are photographers in Nova Scotia. Okay. You could have contracted this out to somebody.
I think it ends up like slowing the organization down because, like, okay, first, the photos aren't usable, right? But thinking about like other kind of fractional work, like, for example, finances, like, I have a client now that's like looking through 3 to 5 years of finances and they're struggling through it really, really slowly. And I think that is a really great opportunity to bring an external person who can probably do this in a month versus you doing it in 5 months. Right? So, like, that's another key benefit of fractional that I feel is sometimes overlooked, kind of the speed at which they can move because of the expertise that they bring. I am actually a really big fan of like hiring vendors and contractors, not only because I am one, but like, for example, for the podcast, I actually also worked with a podcast consultant to come and review the SEO that we were doing, right? Are we ranking in the way that we want to be ranking? Are we reaching people via the different channels that we have set up? So, like email, YouTube, Buzzsprout, right? So, working with a consultant can really move things forward in a faster way. And I'm a big believer of it, of course.
Definitely. I'm a huge fan of paying people for their expertise and not cobbling through, especially in the nonprofit world. Think that if you're doing it in-house, then you're getting it like for free, when actually that's not the case. Like you're paying for your staff time. And if something is taking them 20 hours when it could have taken a consultant 2 hours, like you're not really coming out on top here.
Something that one of our clients said too that was like a huge winning point for her was like, I don't have to train someone, right? She actually is not a very strong fundraiser herself. She's learned a lot over the time that we worked together, but she's like, I don't know how I would teach someone to do this because I don't have these skills, right? So, like, having a fractional can be really, really important if you don't have those skills in house because they can bring it, they can hit the ground running, and they can build that infrastructure. So, your next hire or your first hire actually has an opportunity to be successful.
Totally. I love that. I think of some of the jobs that I've had where I'm like, I wish there had been a fractional in before me to just set up some of these systems so I could hit the ground running. But I'd love to know from your perspective, like, when is the right time to think about hiring a fractional?
I think I have two main situations where a fractional does really, really great. So, one is when you have a huge bundle of yarn that you need to start to unravel, that you don't really know where to start, right? So, like, you don't have the skills in house, it's a little bit of a jumble, and you need someone to tease it apart. I think that's where like high level expertise comes in really, really helpful, but it might not be a full time job to unravel the yarn. The other time is when your organization is very, very stable, right? So if you have government funding and you have a lot of like grant funding and you're just really stuck on a lot of restricted funding, I think a fractional fundraiser in this case is really, really helpful because they can take a look at what you have, strategize, and help build for the future. The organization that I worked at hired a fractional fundraiser before I became the director of development and communications. And it was actually Cindy. That's how we met. She was running the fractional fundraising of CCLA before I got there. And something that would have been a big challenge for me going into that role is setting up a CRM. I had never done that before at that point, right? This was again many years ago now. And the fact that her team had already taken care of that, they had a plan around monthly giving. Some of the strategies were already being implemented around reaching out to different law firms to engage them in giving support to this legal organization, right? So there were some threads for me to pull on without me having to unravel the whole yarn by myself. So I thought that was really, really helpful. What about you? When should an organization work with a fractional?
Yeah, I think those are two really great examples. I think the other one that I want to add, I think, is when an organization is going from that like grassroots, scrappy startup phase and needs to scale quickly into that more stable, like leveling up phase. And when you really need to bring in people who know what they're doing and can do it quickly, but you're not at that point in your finances where you can pay six figures to somebody who is at that skill level. So I think we've seen that a few of our clients and everything coming through who are just at that stage where they're really looking to move out of that kind of instability, like nothing's really being formalized kind of phase, and looking to build maturity, build sophistication, build foundations for the future to just get them up on a different level of operations. So it's that kind of rapid scaling of capacity that I think fractional is really good for.
What you said also made me think of like moving away from reactive to proactive. You can start building all those processes before you hire your first staff person, right? So it just makes it more accessible to be proactive instead of reactive.
I think that's a really great point, and maybe that brings us to what fractional is not. And that is not somebody who's going to put band-aids over everything, or in the case of fundraising, be able to secure $1 million when you don't have any fundraising foundations or infrastructure to start with. There is a similar to any staff member, like not just fractional, but there is a limitation in terms of what you can expect with a fractional. And I think that's important to keep in mind too.
One of the things that I always hear is like fractional is part-time work, which I understand why people think that because you get a fraction of someone's time. I get it. But it's a little bit different because with fractional, your consultant is not an internal person. So you're asking them to focus on the highest, most urgent things to get you from place A to place B. And with a part time person, that's not the case. You could ask this person, hey, I need you to stuff 4,000 envelopes and get it done when you get it done. And you're not really looking to pay that premium based on expertise. And I think that that's the myth, right? Like it's not a part time position that just works on whatever you want. It is an expert who is guiding you and guiding the organization forward.
Yeah, they're here to be your second thought person. In the part-time myth as well, like there's a cap on hours. And obviously, fractions are still human beings. They're not going to be able to work around the clock for you, but there's flexibility in the work that they can do. For instance, I've just been working with one of my clients on a big grant application. It took more time out of my week last week than I usually spend with them. And that's okay because that flexibility is built into our work together. If I need to spend a little bit more time on something to get a deliverable done for them, then that's what I do. And that doesn't change what we're billing them. So they know exactly what to expect and how much they're going to pay for the cost of retaining us. It's not, okay, I've done my 8 hours with you this week, I'm clocking off. It's more about achieving the deliverables and the goals that you set in the strategy together.
Oh, I thought of another thing that fractional isn't. It's not something that you just hand off and ignore. Some people think, oh, I'm bringing on a fractional. I'll just give them all my financial statements and they'll figure it out. Good luck and not answer any more questions, right? And that's not what it is. It is a partnership. So we need your insight just as much as you need ours, right? So that's exactly what it is. It's an equal playing field for you to explore what's realistic for your organization and for you to equally sell the board on it.
Yes, 100%. Like what you just said also, I think applies generally to fundraising as well, that nothing is a kind of pass it off and leave it. Everybody still has to be involved in what's going on. And that's something that I think is really important for the work that I do with my clients too, because I know that this is just a 12-month contract, even though that's a decent chunk of time. I want to make sure that that organization has built internal capacity with me over the time that we're together. So when that contract wraps up, they feel like, okay, I understand fundraising so much more than I did before we started, or we're ready to hire a full-time fundraiser now, or we're ready to take these pieces on ourselves. Like I want that internal capacity to stay with them beyond the time that we spend together. So that's why it's so important to not just pass things off and never get involved again. Like you are also building your skills by hiring a fractional as well.
And you're having someone who can be your actual thought partner. So someone who's like willing to have those tough conversations with you and that's willing to stand by you when you're having a difficult time. Like that's something else that I always hear from people, like the value of working with a consultant or an external party, just having that additional oversight and shoulder to lean on, basically.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk all day about how awesome Fractional is. And I genuinely think, like, not just from somebody who works in this space, but somebody who has been in the nonprofit sector for a long time. Like, when I heard of this model, I thought that it was amazing. And I think that it is, as you said, the future of nonprofit work, because we are unfortunately losing people and we're losing talent, and that talent is becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer people. So if they can work with multiple organizations and share their time and their skills and their expertise, then this sector is all the better for it. But what happens next if somebody is like, I want to find a fractional accountant, HR, fundraiser? Where would you say they start looking?
That is such a good question because these are individuals. They're not tied to companies or something like that. So one key person is going to be Cindy Wegman, right? So she, as I said, host of the podcast beforehand. I am her little poster child of her Fractional Fundraising Academy. We are really, really good at fractional fundraising. And, if anyone listening wants to work with us, please do. We are awesome and we'll do good work for you. But she also is super tapped into all fractionals. So like HR fractionals, comms fractionals, finance fractionals. She is the holder of the keys. Like she knows where all the bodies are buried, I would say, right? So she knows exactly who would be a really good person for you to chat to for any of those. Also, a lot of consultants are very active on LinkedIn. So if you use LinkedIn as a search engine, I think that is really helpful as well. Like if you type in like fractional HR, fractional finance, fractional fundraiser, you'll be able to hit like a whole bunch of local results or people who are 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from you.
And consultants are also really tapped into each other as well and tapped into the consulting world. So if you stumble on a consultant and you think, I don't know if this is exactly the right fit, I really encourage you to just reach out and say what you're looking for, and they can help you to point you in the right direction and maybe connect you with somebody else. So just get on out there.
That's a great point. Actually, 60% of our clients come through referrals. So, like asking someone that who's had a positive experience with a vendor, like they might just give you the right person to connect with. Well, that's all we have for you today around fractional. There are so many different fractional executives doing really, really cool work, but we just wanted to kind of like do a deeper dive, dispel some myths, and get you excited about the future of nonprofit because there's so many different things coming. Like the future of work is here. There is like remote work, there's decent practices, and now this is another way in which organizations will have to innovate. So, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so happy to see you. And as always, if you want to see our lovely, beautiful faces, you can watch this video on YouTube. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe there and tell the algorithm that you want more fundraising expert tips. But that's it for us today. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.